Are you ready to navigate the new way to work? Forbes Books presents Dare to Care in the Workplace with Kathleen Quinn Botaw. Here's Kathleen.
This week, Susan Scott is joining me from her beautiful treehouse in the Pacific Northwest. Susan is a renowned leadership development architect and founder of Fierce Inc. She is also the author of the best-selling Fierce Conversation series, and her latest book, Fierce Love, is now out. Susan, welcome to the podcast.
Well, I've been looking forward to this so much, Kathleen. Thank you for the invitation.
You bet. Well, you may or may not know that we share Vistage International in common. Did you know that?
No kidding. No. What is your role?
I'm a speaker at Vistage International.
Yeah.
I'm also a member and I'm a sponsor. And I am following in your wake. And at every member presentation I have, there's a moment where I offer up your book, Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott.
Well, Kathleen, okay, I'm now your biggest fan.
Well, no, I'm your biggest fan. So, the work that I do is helping organizations dare to care in the workplace. So we'll have a whole separate conversation about this, but this podcast today is about you and everything you've achieved. But I wanted you to know the genesis of why I think everything you're bringing to the world through your books, through your keynotes, through your breakouts is so vitally important, because we have to close the gap between employers and employees. And I wonder, why do you use the word fierce when you titled your book versus intimate, for example?
Well, if you think about marketability, I wanted a title for my work and for my books that would get somebody's attention. In fact, I remember the publisher initially saying, let's change it. The word fierce will put people off. Let's change it to powerful conversations. And I said, if we do that, no one will even look at the book, much less read it. I need a title that will make people think, what the heck is that? And at least pick it up, turn it over, read on the back what it is about. And when you think about fierce, when we're doing a training and I ask everybody if you could put the best possible meaning on the words fierce conversations, what comes up for you? And everybody says honest, passionate, uncurbed, absolutely truthful, getting to the right issue, scary sometimes uncomfortable, but highly productive and powerful. So that's why.
It's an excellent choice of words, because I think it's what needs to happen in our world today. I believe it needed to happen well beyond the last 24 months, but what a time for Fierce. So your brand is very well known. Last year, you celebrated your 20th anniversary of launching Fierce. How have your principles held up over 20 years?
Oh, wow. It's been amazing. By the way, let me just say, Kathleen, when I'm watching everything that is going on in our world and certainly in the United States, I just think, oh, gosh, if I could only get into the Senate, I'd like to talk to those people.
Hear, hear, Susan. Hear, hear.
It's a very narrow self-interest that is in the way of the conversations that need to take place. So you asked about the principles and the practices of Fierce. It's based on results, based on the fact that over the 20 years that we've been in business, we have done very little marketing. The phone rings and companies contact us, from small startups to some of the largest global organizations in the world, because they're realizing that what gets talked about within their walls and how it gets talked about determines what's going to happen and what is not going to happen. So it's been a sort of a long dawning for a lot of leaders that you're navigating one conversation at a time. Like I said in my first book, when I read Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, in which a character is asked, how did you go bankrupt? And he says, gradually and then suddenly. And I laughed. And I had this epiphany that, our careers, and this was after working with my two groups of CEOs for 13 years, I had this epiphany that our careers and our companies and our relationships, and indeed our very lives, are succeeding or flatlining or failing gradually, then suddenly, one conversation at a time. And so I am a card carrying introvert, Kathleen. The last thing I want is talking, more meetings, more conversations. I don't want that. I want fewer meetings, fewer conversations that actually get the job done, that cause things to happen, that put things in motion, that clarify, that allow fresh air into the room, and so that we can be truly innovative and truly collaborative. And a lot of people talk about that, but they're just not there, and they don't even know why.
Conversations that get to the point and get shit done, right, Susan?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And by the way, we can have, Susan Scott for Senate. I'll make the posters.
I don't want to be a senator. I just want to tie them all to their chairs and say, look, I have a few things to lay on you,
I have a few things. Well, so you bring up, your book and your business. So tell us more about the business. People know you for the books and the keynotes. Shine a little light on the business that you run as well.
Well, we work with companies all over the world. We train their trainers, assuming that they have really good internal facilitators. We train them to teach all things fierce throughout their organizations. In fact, one of our largest global clients just said, after having trained all of the leaders in their company, the leaders have said, we think everybody in our organization needs to have this training. That's what we do. And there are 4 objectives to any fierce conversation. The first is to interrogate reality. The first sentence in my first book is, no plan survives its collision with reality. Reality has this irritating habit of changing, which seriously complicates our plans for how things were going to go. And we've all been seriously disrupted by COVID. I mean, it just changed everything overnight. And so, how do we adapt? What do we do? And does the strategic plan that we crafted so rigorously 6 months ago still make any sense at all? And sometimes it just doesn't. So we want to interrogate reality. We want to provoke learning, because one of the things we teach is that a leader's job is not to be right about his or her opinion. A leader's job is to get it right for the organization. And to do that, you really need to understand multiple competing perspectives on the topics that are important, because no one owns the capital T truth about all things. So if you're really having these powerful meetings where you're hearing competing ideas, competing perspectives, so that the best possible decision can ultimately be made, that is where, learning is provoked for everyone. In fact, Robert Redford is known to say in some of the meetings he has at Sundance, if we get this right, I will be different when this meeting is over. And you don't hear a lot of leaders saying things like that. So interrogate reality, provoke learning, tackle the toughest challenges, not just the easy ones, the low-lying fruit. We need to get to the real issue. I mean, what is the most important thing we should be talking about today? Even if we don't particularly want to talk about it, don't feel particularly up to talking about it today, don't know how to talk about it, we got to go there, because if a problem exists, it exists whether we talk about it or not. So we need to just tackle it. And finally, and very importantly, a fierce conversation should always enrich a relationship. So companies understand this, and even globally. So our models are taught in every language practically on the planet, and so it translates. And I even used to live in Japan, and people would wonder, wow, I don't know if this is going to go over in Japan, but it has. It's gone over incredibly well, and even in China. And the thing is, Kathleen, there isn't anything complicated about it. We just need to understand that we are navigating our lives, our careers, our companies, our relationships, one conversation at a time. I just put out my 3rd and final fierce book, and it's titled Fierce Love. So for all these years, I've been focused on conversations. And sometimes people will say, oh, you're in the communications business. And I always say, no, actually, I'm not, because there are so many forms of communication. I'm in the conversation business. That's where it happens. That's where it lives. So one of the reasons why I wrote Fierce Love is because my focus on conversations seriously amplified years ago when I heard a Yorkshire-born poet, David White, speak at a conference. And he said, the young man who's newly married is often frustrated, puzzled, even a little irritated that this lovely person to whom he has plighted his troth, that's how they speak in the UK, and with whom he hopes to spend the rest of his life, why does she keep appearing before his face, wanting to talk yet again about the thing they just talked about last night, last weekend? And so often it has something to do with the quality of their relationship, and he wonders why, why. And then David said, long about age 42, and he smiled because he was 42 at the time and married. He said, long about age 42, if he's been paying attention, it dawns on him, this ongoing conversation that I've been having with my wife is not about the relationship. The conversation is the relationship.
Exactly. And I love that you bring that up because really, when you think about it, our whole life is based on relationships. And in my new book, Dare to Care in the Workplace, there's a whole chapter on building community versus companies. We're building communities within our companies based on relationships. So how have we gotten so far away in the corporate world from my employer status is really about a relationship based on fierce conversations? Where's the gap in your mind?
Well, there are a couple of ways I could answer this. Some of them probably are not, we should not broadcast because they would.
Oh, go for it, Susan. We have an editor.
I read somewhere, so I didn't come up with this, but I read somewhere, someone said, my tolerance for idiots is growing really slim. I used to have a strong immunity built up, but I think there's a whole new strain out there. And so that's, sometimes I think, why can't you see what is right in front of you? If you keep trying to do the same thing you've been doing for decades and you're not getting the results you want, does it not dawn on you that there may be something big that you are missing? And I think, thankfully, more and more organizations are realizing that it's their most valuable currency is not money, it's not fluency in 3-letter acronyms, it's not title, it's relationship. That is the most valuable currency. And I think a lot of leaders are understanding that if I don't capture the hearts as well as the heads of the people in my company, we're not going anywhere, because they may nod and smile, but not really put their backs into the work that we're trying to do. And I've seen up close and personal some brilliant people come into an organization with a brilliant strategy and end up riding right out the back door on that white horse because no one would follow them. They failed to form the kinds of relationships that you're writing about and that I'm writing about. They did not do that. They just thought, okay, here's the plan. You take that hill, report back. And that's just not enough. As I said, Fierce Conversations is really about tackling the toughest issues, and so that you can make the best possible decisions for your organization. So it's very practical. It's not about sitting around and, smiling at each other. It's getting into the most complicated issues that need to be tackled and tackling them with expertise.
Exactly. And having the ability, Patrick Lencioni says, families who love each other fight.
Yeah.
So healthy organizations who love each other, who care about the outcome, can have fierce conversations based on their corporate values and
Yeah.
make sure that they have an outcome. What do you think about Patrick's perspective that it's okay to have a disagreement?
Whenever somebody tells me in thinking about and sort of researching for fierce love, whenever somebody tells me, oh, my husband and I never fight, never ever in all of our umpteen years of marriage, my thought is, you are so lying.
Yeah.
or
30 years
or
in, Susan, to
yeah,
my marriage, they are lying.
they're lying, or they have, one or both of them has struck a silent agreement
Mhm.
that, okay, there are things we simply will not talk about because that won't go well. And so the conversations within relationships, be it corporate or be it at home, if the conversation stops, if we add another topic to the list of things we just cannot talk about, then our conversations become somewhat superficial. One of our corporate clients said, in our meetings, and we're trying to surface the issues, and what we surface is more surface. I thought,
Mhm.
yep, that
Mhm.
happens. People are afraid. They don't know how to have the conversation. So it becomes very quiet. And
Mhm.
all of the possibilities for the relationships, for the organization, for the marriage become smaller and smaller. In fact, one woman said to me, my conversations with my husband, they're so careful and they're so useless that it's as if each one is a small diminishment, and string them together over weeks, months, and years, and it's if we have pulled off our own wings. And when she said that, my heart just kind of lurched. So, in the latest book, I want to answer the questions. How do we get our wings back? Why does it take
Mm.
so little to send love running out the door? Why do we leave so much out when we are supposedly telling the truth? Why don't we disclose what we're really thinking and feeling? What
Mhm.
is the conversation we haven't been able to have that if we could have it could change everything?
It's such a brilliant way to look at it. And isn't it sad, the silence? I feel that the silence is so sad because what that says to the person who decides to be silent is that I don't matter. My point
Yeah,
of view doesn't matter. And
yeah.
they've decided to take a back seat to their very own life.
I'm so glad you said that, Kathleen, because in Fierce Love, there are 8 conversations offered up with really simple guidelines for people. And the first one is, how do I answer the question? If I'm asking myself, do I want this relationship, whether I'm dating someone or committed to someone or whatever, do I want this relationship? We absolutely cannot answer that question until we can answer a very different question, which is my own life working for me? Am I living up to what I dreamed of when I was younger and all the possibilities seemed so vast? Or you know, are the conversations I'm having with this person in my life, um, are we unconsciously squandering what really needs to be talked about? Are we separated by this sort of yawning chasm of mutual incomprehension, of gradually, then suddenly we're in trouble? And so, one of the first conversations in the book starts out as a conversation with myself. Have I compromised myself into a corner? Have I given away so many parts of myself that I'm no longer recognizable even to myself, when
Mhm.
I think about, what I wanted for myself years ago? So it's very important to me to, share my urging that both parties in a relationship need to be healthy and whole, because if you're not, it's easy to think that the problem lies with the other person. That
Of
you're
course.
unhappy, that you're angry, that you don't feel fulfilled because we're pointing the finger at somebody else. And that may be true, but we don't know it yet until we can say, yes, my own life
Mhm.
is working for me. I feel really good about what I'm doing.
And how do people take this, the fierce love, your new book, and translate it into the business world? Because when you talk to audiences of business leaders and other people in the business corporate community, they have been trained to behave very differently in the work environment than the home environment. So I feel like we're supposed to behave one way when we're at home and have that fierce love and build those relationships. And then we come to work and we behave in a totally different way in our relationships. How can business leaders close that gap?
Well, one of the reasons I wrote Fierce Love is because I have gotten so many messages over the years from people saying fierce conversations and fierce leadership. Those books are really helping me in my career, and they're helping me at home. And I just had a great conversation with my partner.
Mhm.
And the same thing can be said of fierce love. As you walk through the models for the conversations in that book, many of them will apply to situations at work. So I feel like once people understand that it's all about our conversations, what gets talked about, how it gets talked about, determines what's going to happen and what's not
Mhm.
going to happen. Once we understand that, we realize I am literally navigating my life one conversation at a time. And given
Mhm.
that I am, how do I get better at it? Because nobody ever taught me how to
Mhm.
have great coverage. You're involved with Vistage, as I was for many years. And I remember going into that role and thinking, how am I, an English major, going to help all of these people from all these different industries, everything from coffee to software to manufacturing to everything in between. What in the world am I going to be doing that will be helpful to them? So it was clear to me that I was not going to be going in and advising them, in the sort of traditional view of a coach. This is the playbook. This is what, you need to do. Clearly that wasn't going to be happening. So I had to create a way of drawing them out so that they would increase their own clarity about the most important issues and identify clearly what is at stake to gain or lose, and identify at least one powerful step that they're committed to taking. And those things that I just described don't happen if I'm doing the talking. They
Mhm.
happen because I'm asking the questions. And the
Exactly, the
question,
power of
yes,
questions.
and the question after the question, and the one after that. The other day, somebody was saying, freedom and independence is really, really important to me. And in a lot of conversations, people would just say, okay, yeah, that's important to me too, and move on. But I typically will say, tell me about what freedom and independence, what does that mean to you?
Mhm. Mhm.
What does that look like? And off we go into much more interesting water than we were in if we had just stayed on the surface. Sometimes the analogy I use especially with our corporate clients, but you know, I grew up on water skis in Tennessee. I love to water ski. It's a lot of fun. You can get a tan. It's a great workout, etc. But I'm not in the business of water skiing now. I'm in the business of scuba diving, of putting on a tank and going beneath the surface of the water, because there is a whole nother world down there that I will never even see if I stay on the surface. So it's about getting down to, what is the most important thing we should be talking about.
Mm. Brilliant. And I'm a scuba diver too, so we have a whole nother
Oh,
thing to talk about.
very cool.
Very cool. I knew this would be a fierce conversation. And on that note, let's take a break. But coming up in the second part of my chat with Susan Scott, the founder of Fierce Inc., Susan breaks down what makes a fierce conversation.
The simplest definition of a fierce conversation is one in which we come out from behind ourselves into our conversations and make them real.
This has been Dare to Care in the Workplace. To connect with Kathleen, go to KathleenQuinnBotaw.com. Kathleen's book, Dare to Care, is available wherever books are sold. Dare to Care in the Workplace is a production of Forbes Books.